All right. Well, thank you for joining us today for our Expressions Through Poetry program. Today we have Kim B. Miller, who is the Poet Laureate for Prince William County, Manassas, and Manassas Park. I don't think that requires much more introduction, so I'm just going to hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, for those of you who don't know, my name, as she said, Kim B. Miller, and I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. And I spent most of my life on Long Island. And ever since I moved from New York, I resided in Prince William County. So here I am. And a little bit of further background, I guess you can call it. I am a spoken word poet, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, and a facilitator and a motivational speaker. I'm also an author, and I have several books. And my latest book is called My Poetry is the Beauty You Overlook. And I said spoken word poet earlier, so let me touch on that a bit. So, what is a spoken word poet? You know, you hear that term, you're like, what is it, right? So, there's such things as poets, and there's things as spoken word poets. A poet basically reads their poem. Very little inference, very little change in voice. They're basically reading their poem. Nothing wrong with poets, it's just a different sort of reader. A spoken word poet is someone who's supposed to make you feel their words. There's supposed to be inference in their voice, supposed to be changes. And yes, spoken word poets do call themselves poets because people don't know what spoken word poet is. So I know it's a little bit confusing. But so you know the difference when you're hiring a poet versus a spoken word poet, because sometimes people hear spoken word poet and then they hire a poet and they're like, wait, what happened here? So just so you know that. Also, you'll hear me later doing some haikus or senryus, and you say, okay, now here's another term. Poets are wordy. Let me warn you right now. We're a little wordy. So, what is a haiku? So, a haiku is a super short poem. It's only 3 lines, 5 syllables on the first line, 7 syllables on the second line, 5 syllables on the third line. So, you have a total of 17 syllables, not words, unless they're all one syllable. So, that's why I said syllables, to make a point. It started in Japan, only on nature and flowers. That's the meaning of basically what a haiku is. We equate it to syllables, even though their language is different, is based on moras. There's no equivalent to a mora in English language. So we went with syllables. So you'll hear people say it's not equal, and they're correct. It's never going to be completely equal because the languages are different. A senryu is the same thing as a haiku. It's just not on nature and flowers. So it still has the same 17 syllables, the same 5 syllable on the first line, 7 on the second, 5 on the last. You still only have 17 syllables, not words. And you say, why do you keep saying that? Because people keep tagging me in these and they keep doing words. It's not words, it's syllables. So senryu is for the non-traditional ones, the ones not based on nature and flowers. So those can be on different subjects. And yes, for those of you who know more than one, there are different types of haiku. I'm just talking about the 575 or the 17 syllable ones. Okay. Now, you'll also hear me say chemisms. That's just my sayings. I have to call them something, so don't overthink that one. But I really wanted you to understand what a haiku and a senryu is, even though you're not going to hear me say senryu anymore because they're all part of the haiku family. So we just say haiku. And I say haiku before each one I do because I like it. It's not a pattern that's necessary. Okay? So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read a poem and then I'm going to do some haiku. This first one is called Love. I hear the birds. I hear the happiness in their chirps. Their melody is floating on a stream of air, and I inhaled. I am an admirer of beautiful things. I worship completeness. I don't grasp at compliments because I love the fragrance called me. There may be gaps in my teeth, but not in my beauty. I see stretch marks as lines that allow me to write on my soul. I love this feeling of completeness. I am not a ray of light. I'm a burst of sunshine. I see courage in the cracks that people overlook. What you call broken, I call a masterpiece of unassembled pieces. The love that radiates from you, I feel it. I heed your frequency. I don't judge your flow. I choose to see you, not critique you. I emancipate your baggage. I superimpose love on your hurt so I can see you better. I invite you to RSVP for contentment. Display more compassion. Drip anxious thoughts. Cleanse love. Create solutions to future problems. Love is free. Don't hoard it. Outthink your selfishness so love can be a resource. Expand. Swim in the deep end of love. No one can eclipse you. Love is not missing, it's soul deep. Look. So that one was called Love. And now I'm going to do some haikus. And remember earlier, we talked about haikus, super short, 17 syllables. You're not going to hear the syllable count when I'm saying it, but no, it had to be written in that strict form. Okay? Haiku. If you're not racing against yourself, then you're on the wrong track. I'm going to repeat that one. And again, some of these are from memory. So those of you who are going to be counting on me later and say that one was 15 or that one was 14, you may be correct, but believe me, it's written correctly. I'm going to base some of these on memory. Haiku. If you're not racing against yourself, then you're on the wrong track. In other words, your biggest competition is you. Haiku. Stop talking about cutting people off. You know your knife ain't that sharp. What does that mean? That's a saying. You talk about, I'm going to cut so and so off. I'm sick of so and so. But are you really willing to do it or are you just talking? Haiku. Some of you are blaming yourself for being cut by broken people. In other words, is it really you or is it some of the broken people that are making mistakes that you are owning up to? And all of these have more than one meaning. Some I'll kind of explain because they get really poety. And some I'm going to leave for you to figure out. Haiku. Just because they're in your nest, that does not mean they want to see you fly. That's one of those I'll let you figure out on your own. I'll repeat it though. Haiku. Just because they're in your nest, that does not mean they want to see you fly. Haiku. If you give them the key to your joy, when they leave, they can take the lock. Repeat. Haiku. If you give them the key to your joy, when they leave, they can take the lock. You are joyous enough as you are. Don't give anybody the key to your joy. And this one is a chemism. I say, some of you are too busy explaining your journey to someone who will not be going with you. I'll say that one again. Some of you are too busy explaining your journey or your attempted journey or the path you're trying to walk or the goal you're trying to get to someone who will not going with you. Sometimes people are just in your life for a season. You don't wear your winter coat in the summertime. Seasons aren't bad, they just change. Okay, going on to another poem, but before I go to another poem, I'll answer some common questions I get. Common question. What's a poet laureate? Get that a lot. I say it's easier to go with the name poet ambassador because people kind of figure that out. My other poet laureate friend says poet mayor. So whichever way you like. So what do I do as poet laureate? I go to places where people think they know what poetry is because a lot of people still thinking roses are red and things of that great nature. And roses are red are beautiful, but it's really poetry has expanded. Spoken word poetry, haiku, sonnets, senryu, tanka. There's so many different forms of poetry. Freehand writing. So I go where people think they know where poetry is and tell them, hey, let's expand your vision. And I go places that have never heard of poetry or think they have and say, here's what poetry is, what it can do. And I love going to schools and libraries because young people get it. And so do old people. Don't put us in that box that we don't get it. We get it. Because, before you guys wrote it, guess who was writing poetry? Some of us were. So poetry is beautiful. It's expression. It's happy. It's sad. It's the weight that paper holds. It can hold so much. It can hold your happiness. It can hold your sadness. It can hold your pain. Your pen is a gateway to freedom if you're willing to write what you express. So that's the possibility of what poetry is. And for people who have told me, it's just writing, you're over exaggerating because you're a poet, blah, blah, blah. And for some of these people, I said, really? So, did you have a diary when you were growing up? And a lot of them said, yes, it's just paper. What you're writing it for? Because it held the weight of your thoughts. And that can be freeing to a lot of people. So if you have a thought and you want to write it, it doesn't have to rhyme. As you can tell, most of my poetry, 99% of it does not rhyme. Doesn't mean I don't like rhyming poems. I just prefer to write freehand. So if you write rhyming, keep rhyming. If you don't like rhyming, don't write rhyming. Poetry is whatever you decide it is and whatever you decide it isn't. And no one gets to decide if you're a poet or not, but you. And I wrote this particular haiku for those who kind of like to judge poets a lot. Happens all the time. Haiku. Just because they don't poet like you poet, that doesn't mean they ain't poets. Poets, poeting is different. You hear me? Ain't. Yes, poet is not English in its proper form. It's whatever you want it to be. Of course, you want, your point to be recognized, or maybe you don't. Maybe you want to write it in a way that only you get it. All of those choices are up to you. Okay, so now you know that. What's the next question I always get? How do you poet better? How do you get your point across? How do you say it so that people really get it? Now, you have to decide. Everybody's not built to be a spoken word poet, and that's fine. If you want to be a poet, there's a lot of beautiful, fantastic poets out there. Absolutely good to go there. If you feel you can't memorize it and you need to read it, absolutely good to go there. Do poetry the way you want to poet. Make your own rules. That's rule number one. Make your own rules. So, you say, okay, Kim, I've decided I want to be a spoken word poet. I really want to identify. I want the audience to really get it. I want them to understand what I'm saying. I want them to feel the words. So how do I do that? Okay, I get that often and I do mentor people on that. And the first thing I tell them to do is practice. I know you don't want to hear this. Practice. What do? And you practice. Because that's what I do. People say, you still practice? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how you decide where your inference is. That's how you decide where to slow down, where to speed up, where to syllabalize, where to enunciate, where to shout, where to whisper. It's where the line feels that way to you. You practice it and you practice it again and you practice it again. and you feel the words that you're saying, and then you find natural places that work for you to speed up, slow down, get louder, get softer. Your whole poem shouldn't be you yelling. The whole poem shouldn't be you whispering. Don't make it extremes. Break it up. Because if it's whispering the whole time, people are going to be like, okay. First, they'll be like, and a few minutes in, they'll be like, okay, I can't hear you. I'm tuning out. You don't want people to tune out. So you don't want to make it gimmicky. Just make it real. So make it naturally flow for you. And then if you still feel that you haven't hit the mark, ask somebody, another poet who you respect, spoken word poet, to critique you and give you some pointers. So a common question that every poet gets is, what is poetry? And I decided to try to write a poem about that very subject. And I had a couple of poets, I've done this in front of poets because I had to be brave enough to try it, because, poets are very picky about other poets defining what poetry is, as you can imagine. Anyway, so far I've gotten really good. I have not heard of, oh, no, you missed the mark. That's way off. That's not, no, 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 go back to the drawing board. I haven't gotten that. I've gotten a lot of yes, yes, love that. So I will read what poetry is, because, again, poets get it often. As poet laureate, you can imagine I get this question a lot. Remember when you thought words had to be in a melody to sing to you? Poetry was a foreign flavor, an acquired taste. You thought poems like Roses Are Red made you well read. You didn't realize poetry has blossomed. I don't blame you. Poetry is often unrecognizable, spoken with passion, written on hearts in invisible ink. So, how can I expect you to embrace the unseen? Seen in many forms, but grouped together as one. What is poetry? Poetry is unsolicited help. It holds us up when pain tries to erase our voice. It allows us to pour to emptiness and create peace. The ingredients in one poem can feed people who didn't even know they were hungry. Poets make feelings tangible. They script mountains into pebbles. Poetic verses feel like the wind caresses every verse. Some poems rhyme, no reason. They almost have a subtle fragrance, an undeniable scent that is unexpected but welcomed. This garden of poets is stunning and diverse. Each poet's pen bleeds an alternate personal truth. So don't judge an ink by its color. There are no rules. The lines in paper are just suggestions. Besides, a poet's words ascend from the limitation of paper. They make tears flow. They break stereotypes. Poems are medicinal, and poetry is freedom exhaling. Words are not owned. We all just borrow them. Poetry is minted words meant to make a permanent change. The next time you inhale the aroma of a poem, feel the words and embrace the energy they provide. Embrace unconfinable art drawn with words. Poetry is expression flowered in feelings. It could be a moment or a lifetime of moments. What is poetry? Poetry is the first time you kiss words and words kiss you back. That's poetry. And it's everything you could think of Nothing that you would remember. I've been there. Oh, that was a great line. I remember it. No, got paper everywhere. People say, how do you remember? Oh, next question. Sorry. How do you remember? How do you write? How do you do what you do? Okay. My mind is one of those that's always going. So I have paper everywhere. Yes, I do paper and I do it online too. But I don't want to hop up every time a line comes to my head. So I write on my phone and I have paper in different strategic places around the house. Definitely on a nightstand because sometimes when I'm trying to go to sleep, that's when this poem will pop in my head and I'll write it down. And the next morning I'll be like, I don't even remember writing that. So, and I have a not video, a audio recorder I use when I'm driving that I hit the button, record it while I'm driving, and I keep going. I don't have a particular time I write. People ask, do you write a certain time? No, I just write when the poem flows. Do I limit myself to certain times to write? No. Do I only use paper? No. But when I do use paper, I only use pencil. I know. It's just one of my rules. I only write in pencil. I do write on a computer, but I really prefer to write on paper. If I know I'm writing a book, I do it immediately on a computer because transcribing it back is tiresome. If I'm just writing to write, I still write on paper with a pencil, mechanical, because I don't want the pencil to break while I'm in the middle of a poem. How do you get around writer's block? Is another common question. I don't have writer's block. I feel very blessed in that regard. I write whenever I want to write. Do I always finish a poem when I'm writing it? No, I do not. Sometimes I write it, come back, write it, come back, write it, come back. And don't be an over editor. For those of you poet heads, you know what I'm talking about. You write the poem, you edit it, you go back, you edit it, you go back, you edit it, you go back. 2 years later, you're still editing that same poem. Come to a point where you say, I'm good with the poem, and then let it go. If you are one who perform the poem first before you're done with your final edit. When you say it out loud in front of a crowd, it's different. Next question. How is performing different online versus in person? Online is different because we're used to the energy from the audience, believe it or not. Poets, they feel the energy in the room. We feel people smiling. We feel people nodding. We see all that. We take all that energy and we use it to perform with. What happens if no one does any of that? We still perform. It's just easier for most spoken word poets when we get that energy back. So doing it online has that issue because you don't get that same sort of energy. So you have to learn to just do your poem, feel your poem yourself, deliver it in a way that you're happy with, and then at the end of the day, you'll be happy. It's still totally different from delivering it in person. And do I have a preference? I've learned to love both now. When I first started, I was like, get me back in front of a crowd. But now I'm good on both platforms. So no, I still would love to perform in front of people, but I don't have a problem online. Let's see, what was the next common question I was going to go over? Do I get scared performing in front of a crowd? Nervous a little bit. Terrified, no. I think a little nervous energy is good for the soul. So that's pretty natural. Sometimes I'm calm and it doesn't bother me at all. I'm odd. Sometimes the large crowd, I'm like, a couple hundred, thousand, okay, smooth. And I get in front of a smaller crowd, I'm like, oh. So, it's all about the mind. And basically I have learned that uh I used to want to be like, I want them to like me, I want them to like my now I just want you to hear me. And since I'm loud, you're gonna hear me. I kind of can tell I'm loud, right? So now I'm just, whether you like me or not, you're going to hear my poem, you're going to hear my thoughts. And even if you disagree with it, I'm perfectly good with that as long as you heard me out. So that's one of the beautiful things of poetry. You can give people a totally different perspective than what they came in with. And sometimes they leave with your thoughts in their head and the possibility of change, the possibility of another way of looking at a thought that they didn't have until you said it. So don't be scared to say what you have to say, even if it's not a popular opinion, even if it's not the most beautifully said, the most beautifully crafted thing you've ever written. Just do it because you felt like writing at the time. You never know who you're going to touch. You never know. And for those audience members who say, should I go up to a poet after the event and tell them how I felt? Absolutely. Absolutely. We love that. We love when people come up and say, oh, that poem was about me, or oh, you touched me when you said such and such, or how did you know? And whatever you're saying, we just like to hear it. So, yes, please do. Please come up. Okay, so I'm going to do some haikus. Haiku. Ink drops at a deep pitch. Only poets can hear. Truth needs a partner. I'll rewind that. And that's what they say in the poet world when they ask you to redo a poem that you just did, or a couple of lines. If it's a full poem, they're asking you to go back a couple of lines. If it's a haiku, they're asking you to repeat the whole haiku. So I'll rewind that. Haiku. Ink drops at a deep pitch. Only poets can hear. Truth needs a partner. Haiku. Be who you are, not to impress, but to inspire. Let your greatness drip. Haiku. You need to stop giving people the pen and the paper to judge you with. Haiku. You understand that poets write about pain they didn't walk through, too, right? And for that one, poets write about their own personal lives, and poets write about other people's personal lives, and poets write about particular topics. So just because you hear a poet do a particular poem on a topic, it doesn't mean it was their life. I do a lot of parenting poems. I had fantastic parents, but I know a lot of people who do not have fantastic parents. So I write for everyone. So don't assume that the poet is doing a poem about themselves. It's best to ask. And normally when I do a parenting poem, I use my disclaimer because my parents have read my poems. They're like, wait a minute now. You do tell people it's not about us, right? Yes, I tell them. So anyway, haiku. If you're satisfied with crumbs, why would they offer you a whole meal? I know. I could explain that one, but I'm going to leave that one for you to figure out. Kimism sayings. If your dreams don't scare you, dream bigger. Dream bigger. Don't let the fact that it's big scare you. Your dream should be. Your goal should be. What you want to do should be. You won't make it to the next level if you don't have a level that's next. Kimism. Again, you won't make it to the next level if you don't have a. Okay, moving on. Okay, back to commonly asked questions. Let's see. Have I always been a poet when I know as a poet, all those great things? No, I have not always been a poet. Not that I call myself one anyway. My mom said I always liked dancing. I probably would have been a dancer if I had not been a poet. And writing. I was horrible speller, horrible. I can't say it enough, horrible when I was younger. So if you had told me then I was going to be a poet and performing, and I would have laughed. So, poet? I can't even spell. What are you talking about? So I say I have to say, don't limit yourself to what you see as your flaws or things you're not good at now. You never know what you can become if you put your mind to it and try it. So that's one. I really got serious about poetry probably about 10 years ago, but I had been writing poems before that, even though when I look back now, I would not call them poems because, as the older you get and you look back at your old poems, you're like, oh, what was I thinking? So it's more or less, I guess if you want to call it love letters, more than poetry. So even though they poems, I guess, just being over critiquey here. But so that's how that started. I don't think I ever would have taken it to the level of performing though. I was happy writing and then I was like, well, why not go perform? Why not go perform? And that's how I got here. And so be it. The first place I performed in Prince William County was in Manassas, and a group called Spirits and Lyrics had a platform, and I went out to their went out to their event, and instead of performing like an open mic like a regular person, I immediately go for a slam. Okay, what's a slam? So a slam is a contest. Poets actually go and perform and compete against each other. Normally you have a certain amount of time. Normally it's 3 minutes. Each slam is different, but normally it's 3 minutes. What happens if you go over that time? Depends on the slam. Some slam rules are if you go a second over, you're disqualified immediately. Some give you a certain amount of grace, but your points go down. And the points are, how do you judge it? Well, depends on the slam. Most pick total strangers out of the audience who don't know any of the participants, so that you have somebody fair judging. So it could be someone who knows a lot about poetry or someone who's never heard a poem in their life. And they basically pick a score, and normally they ask them to add a decimal point in case the scores get close. And they put up their score at the end of each poem, and they add the scores up, and whoever gets the most wins. And that's how it works for a poem slam, a full poem. They also have things called haiku death match, and I don't know why they call it a death match, because it's not like at the end somebody dies. I don't know why. Again, I don't know why the name came up, but anyway, so basically, and that one depends on the rules. So you have so many haikuists, people who do haikus, that they allow into the contest. And then at the end, at the final stage, is two haikuists, two people who do haikus left, and they will decide how many the winner gets. Let's say 7 out of 10 or whatever the ratio is. They tell you that, and whoever wins the most rounds wins. And that one also is done by judges. Instead, though, of the point system, they pick which poet wins. So let's say I put on a white scarf and my opponent puts on a red scarf. And the judges at that point are picking which poet had the better haiku in their opinion. So that one is not based on scores. They just pick whose ever haiku they like the best. And I've done a couple of those, and I did one for Southern Fried, which is one of the largest events and poetry competitions in this region, and I won the 2019 Southern Fried Haiku Slam, and that was daunting. I don't know if I'd do that again. Not because I didn't have fun, but I can get up and do a talk and motivational speak, facilitate, and do poems and haiku all day. But that competing and trying to figure out when you have 1,000 haiku, which one do you use now? And then, if you don't win that round, you should have used the other one. It was nerve-wracking. Anyway, so for the Southern Fried competition, I was doing good. I was up a bit, and then it got tied. So whoever won the next one was going to win the contest. She went first, and then I went second. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out which one of my gazillion haikus I'm going to use to win. And I'm literally up there arguing with myself. No one sees this because I'm like this. But in my head, I'm like, okay, which one are you going to do? I don't know which one. Which one? Are you going to win? Anyway, so I eventually picked one and I ended up winning. So I'm really happy about that. I'm also the DMV, which stands for DC, Maryland, Virginia. I say that because DMV is also Department of Motor Vehicles for a lot of people. No, not Department of Motor Vehicles. DC, Maryland, Virginia, Tri-State. DMV Renaissance Award winner for Haiku 2021. I was recently awarded that. I'm really happy about that. And I'm also fourth place winner in the 90th annual Writers Digest contest. The 90th annual. 90 years they've been doing this. And I'm fourth place in the non-rhyming poetry category. So that's some of the awards I've won. And yes, I've tried for more. For people to say, oh, that's great. You get to do all the stuff you love. You don't always get to do everything you love. You don't always get to win everything you go for, but I will try and keep trying. And don't let a loss convince you that that means it's not for you. Just because you lost that time doesn't mean it wasn't for you. Maybe that one wasn't for you. You keep trying, you keep going back, you keep getting better, you keep working on your craft, you keep working on your writing, you keep working on your delivery to do it better each time. Am I what I consider myself a slam poet? No. Even though I have won a slam in 2018, um, that was nerve wracking too. I find that the competitions are nerve wracking for me. So that doesn't mean I'll never do one, but that's I found that's my Achilles heel. That's when I'm like, I was trying to make it. That's when I start getting, you know. So that's my most nervous point is when I'm competing. When I'm just doing, not just like it's nothing, but when I'm doing poetry, I'm good. When it's competition, that's when I get frazzled. So, and have I ever worked with mentoring kids and stuff? Yes, I work with DC Scores, which does elementary, middle school, and high school. They do soccer, they do poetry, and at the end, they have their own slam competing against the different schools. And to see the kids come in with their great poetry and learn how to, perform it just a little bit tighter, a little bit better to identify with the audience, to get their voice to the back, to act big, because when you're on a stage, here's a little clue for you who wants to get on stage. When you're on a stage, you have to act even bigger because people in the audience, if you just go, it looks super small in the audience. So you have to exaggerate your emotions a little bit, not for poets now. I don't want y'all up there, da 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 da. But when you're doing a performance with your poetry, you really have to sell it on a stage because you look smaller when the stage is so big. But to go and watch them expand their vision and to see them do their absolute best, win or lose, has been fantastic. So, yes, mentoring is part of the joy of what I call poetry. Okay, so now that I've answered some more commonly asked questions, I'm going to do another poem. And this one is called Move Forward. I was going to do the short one on poetry. I may come back to that. I'll do this one. When did you decide to take a back seat in your own life? You are never meant to live in your own shadow. I know the darkness can be enticing, your comfort level secure, your insecurities hidden. You can't play hide and seek with pain. Pain will wait for you. Flaws are beauty marks on the road to greatness. Scars remind us that imperfections don't kill us. Missteps don't erase effort, but you can't succeed if you're transcribing judgment, blinking in doubt, hesitating instead of creating. If you feel sadness, if you feed sadness, how will joy grow? Stop waiting for opportunity to knock. Go find her. Braille her with your vision. I'm not asking you to look at the glass as half full. I'm asking you to be grateful you have something to drink. Think about it. If you gave up every time you fell, you wouldn't be walking now. Break out of your self-imposed isolation. You locked yourself in, hoping solitude would breed success. But your purpose waits to be discovered. While you Netflix and chill, your goals are going on HBO. Hope, basically optional. You made your situation your identity. You put a down payment on pain, but rented solutions. You're in a relationship with hours when you need to be dating seconds. Don't beg time to stay. Just use what you have before time does what it always does. Leave. You can do it. Work on your purpose, work on your purposes, work on what you love, expand outside your comfort zone. Haiku. It's okay to be scared. Do it anyway. Scared people succeed too. Rewind. Haiku. It's okay to be scared. Do it anyway. Scared people succeed too. Haiku. Please recognize your accomplishments or you will label them failures. Rewind. Haiku. Please recognize your accomplishments or you will label them failures. Haiku. If someone says you shine too bright, tell them to take a seat in your shade. Haiku. They thought they broke you, but you're a glow stick. They just exposed your light. Rewind. Haiku. They thought they broke you, but you're a glow stick. They just exposed your light. Haiku. For those of you who like these. How come super is a man, but we have to wonder about woman? Haiku. How come super is a man, but we have to wonder about woman? Haiku. I marvel at the storm outside. It's mad neat though. Too much ice. Man. Now, I'm gonna pause. Yes, even though you're be watching this on video. Second for you to think about what was that haiku about? Thinking? I'm gonna rewind that one. Haiku. I marvel at the storm outside. It's mad neat though. Too much ice. Man. Let's see if anybody got that one right. And then I'll go back to the one I did earlier. Marvel. Name sounds familiar. Make movies, comic books, maybe. Storm. Isn't she a character who controls the weather? Magneto. Think I just broke that into syllables, didn't I? And of course, Iceman. So, I'll repeat it now that you've figured it out. I marvel at the storm outside. It's mad neat though. Too much ice. Man. And the one before that? How come super is a man, but we have to wonder about woman? Superman, Wonder Woman. And these are some of the things you can do with 17 syllables. Haiku, a poem, can be written about anything, any subject. Change it to a subject you love. Write about anything that you think is interesting to you, you think is different to you, that you'd like to be clever about, that you think would be fun, that you think would stump people. Write it. It'll take you a little while. The 17 syllables, sometimes can be confining when you first start, and then you're right, and then you're right, and then you're right. Don't forget, traditional ones, nature and flowers, non-traditional ones, any subject. I only make that distinction because us poets in the poet world, spoken word poet, call them all haiku. But I need you to know the difference between a haiku and a senryu, so you don't go to a haiku traditional Japanese contest with a senryu and get, what's that? That's not a. So I will do a traditional haiku. And traditional haikus have to be all on the same line. So you complete a thought on each line. The first line is a complete thought, the second line is a complete thought, and the third line is a complete thought. Whereas in senryus, in a non-traditional haiku, you can carry over the thought to the next line. It doesn't have to be complete in the first line, second line, third line. So I'll do a traditional one so we can talk about it and break it down. Traditional haiku. Frozen lakes form fun. Winter's breath is blowing joy. We glide till frost bites. Now, frozen lakes form fun. A complete thought on the first line. Winter's breath is blowing joy. Second line, another complete thought. We glide till frost bites. Another complete thought. So along with a traditional haiku, is a complete thought on each line. Nothing carries over to the next line. That's why in traditional haikus, every line starts with a capital letter. But in a senryu, every line may not start with a capital letter because you may continue the thought or the word onto the next line. There are some haiku police, I will warn you, who'll be like, oh no, you can't transfer the word to the next line. That's it. Yes, you can. You can. You'll never be able to make everybody happy. So, right for you. Right for you. Another traditional haiku. Haiku. Butterflies can't swim, so they dance with large raindrops. Music is dripping. Complete thought on each line. Butterflies can't swim, first line, so they dance with large raindrops, second line. Music is dripping, last line. So now you know the difference between traditional haiku and senryu, and you do understand that some of the haiku police will be coming for you if you carry it over on the next line. I do carry it over on the next line, and I ignore the haiku police. Haiku. Yes, they threw likes at your post, but they don't like you. Jealousy likes you. Obviously not a traditional haiku because it's not on nature or flowers. And that one, yes, they threw likes at is the first part. And my sentence continues on the next line. Your post, but they don't like you. Then I have a period. And my next line is jealousy likes you. So that's how you would do a senryu or non-traditional one. All righty. Let's see. Do another haiku. Haiku. You cannot divide yourself into fractions to make someone else whole. Haiku. Now, this one is based on memory, so I may be a few syllables off on this one. But here we go. Haiku. Girls, don't let a boy tell you not. Rewind. Haiku. Girls, don't let a boy tell you you're not beautiful, like they would know. So, I'm doing well on time. Let me get back to some of my FAQ, frequently asked questions. Normally is, well, it really depends. I know a lot of girl poets. I know a lot of boy poets. And do I have a preference? Do I find one is better than the other? No, I think both are equally great. I've had kids read to me, and their poetry has been stunning and beautiful and full of imagery, full of expression. So I don't believe that there's a certain age that you can write poetry better than someone else. I think it's really about how dedicated you are to writing your poem the best way you can. I don't think it's age driven. I think it's passion driven. So if you're passionate about something you're writing about, I think it comes across. Write for you. Don't write for snaps. And snaps is something common when we're performing. If someone likes something you said, normally they snap. There's been 1,000 stories as to where that originated. I personally don't know. My personal opinion is I think they snap during the poem, by the way, is because they don't want to interrupt you. Because clapping would get too loud, you wouldn't be able to hear the poet, but snapping, you can still hear them and they get the love at the same time and they can keep going with their poem. But you can look up this, again, there's so many scenarios on why people snap during the poem. At the end, people do snap and clap, so there's no rule for it. But normally during the poem, you'd snap, you wouldn't clap because it's kind of throws the poet off a little bit. Now, if you started clapping because it was that good, hey, we're good with that too. Now, I've had people clap and be like, wow, that line was fantastic. I don't go, oh, how dare you? I'm like, yeah, I got him. They like that line. So, yes, you still can clap in the middle, but traditionally, it's the snap. Is there any subject that I stay away from? No, there absolutely isn't. But I do believe in one particular phrase: know your audience. Do a poem that's appropriate for the audience to which you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a group of women and you're coming in with a I hate women poem, how well do you think that's going to go over? Come on now. So if you're talking to a group of moms and you're talking about you need to be, motherhood is, blah, 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 how do you think that's going to go over? So write about whatever you want to write about, but know your audience, know who you're talking to. Know you want your poem to resonate with the people you're talking to. And sometimes, yes, you write a poem to really get the people you're talking to think about it. So it may be an uncomfortable poem for a group of people who you're doing this poem on purpose and you really want them to think outside the box. That's fine. But it's my opinion that every poem shouldn't be I want you to think outside the box. Sometimes you just want to identify with the audience, and sometimes you want to shake the audience up. There's nothing wrong with doing both, but don't alienate the audience. There's a difference. There's a difference between trying to get them to see another point of view and then just walk in and saying, to a group of women, all women are dumb. Well, if you say that, I don't know what your poem better escalate quickly to how fantastic we are, because we're going to start tuning you out right quickly if you started off with a group of women talk about all women are dumb. Now, it would be strategic for you to say that and say, all women are dumb. We're sick of hearing that. Oh, okay, now you don't reel us in. Okay, you got us. But if it's really a poem that you really sincerely believe that all women are dumb, then don't go to a women organization where there's a room full of women and come and degrade us. That doesn't make sense. So know your audience. Doesn't mean you can't say something that would make them uncomfortable, but if you're going to make them uncomfortable, have a point. Have a point that they can walk away with and say, "Thought about that. You know what? Got a point there. Who knew? I never thought about that." But if you're just there to make people feel bad for no cause, for no reason, for no endpoint, stay away from that. And you'll find that a lot of places don't even allow that. It's called hate speech. And where the poets go to perform, a lot of them are called open mics, and we have to be careful because there are now open mics for different venues, like for music exclusively. But typically, most poets go to open mics, which are held both online and in person. And you basically go there not just to say your poem, but to work on your delivery, to work on saying in front of a crowd, and to fine tune lines. I find that after I've said my poem, the first time I've written it and the first time I perform it, that's when I edit it. Because when I'm saying it out loud in front of people, it's like, oh, I like that line. Oh, I hate this line. And sometimes the line you hate is the one people lose their mind over. And you're like, let me say this. And I hate this line. And you're like, oh my goodness. And you're like, really? So I'm going to keep that line in. So, sometimes it helps to get another person's perspective on your work. Now, if you absolutely despise that line and everybody loved it, you can still take it out. Remember, this is your poem, your writing, write sincerely for you. not for applause. I never write based on which poem got the most snaps, which poem I think will get the most claps, which poem. I write based on a point. People say, do you write on different subjects? Yes. In other words, someone will call me and say, hey, Kim, there's a program on such and such. Can you write a poem on it? Absolutely. So I write poems specifically based on the subject matter that they're talking about, that program is about, and things of that nature. And some poets don't. Some poets just write on their feelings or what comes out. There's nothing wrong for you to do what's right for you. This is not a mandate. I'm just answering frequently asked questions. If you just want to write on history or yourself or whatever, that's fine. That's the beauty of poetry. Write what suits you. It's your pen, your paper. Do what you want. Let's see, another common question I get. Do I get sick of performing the same poems? Because sometimes people request the same poems. No, I don't. And it really is funny because sometimes I'm like, I've heard people say, I'm going to retire a poem. I'm like, really? How do you retire a poem? Because, sometimes I just want to say a poem and nobody's requested it but me. But, it's good enough. I want to hear it. There'll be times when you've said a poem and you think, nobody wants to hear this poem again. Don't retire a poem because you think that. If you have said it enough and you don't want to say it anymore, by all means, retire the poem. But if you think people are sick of hearing it, don't. Because how many times have you listened to that same song over and over again, and you'll go into a concert to see the person sing it live, even though you've listened to it 15,000 times on the radio or on a CD or on MP3 or whatever you're listening to. You just want to hear it again because you're familiar with it, you love the rhyme of it. So is the same with poetry. Poetry is no different. So if you have a poem that you love and people love, and you think people are sick of hearing it, they're not. They're not. Keep it unless you are sick of saying it. What other, let's see, common question. Yes, okay. So I'm going through all these in my mind. Common question. Poet laureate will be for 2 years. I was appointed October 2020. So I will be poet laureate until October 2022. I'm the first African-American poet laureate for Prince William County, Manassas, and Manassas Park. Prince William County was the first county in Virginia to have a poet laureate, and that was in 2014. And they, at that year, had two poet laureates. They could not pick between the two. So they had two poet laureates that year. And if you want to find more information about me, you can go to my website, which is kimbmiller.com. KIMBmiller.com. Love to come to your school, your library, your event. And I think poetry is one of the most freeing things that exists because it helps you express yourself. There's poems that every poet has written that they'll never say out loud, even us performing poets, because it's just personal, and there's personal ones we'll say 5,000 times. It really just depends on the poet and how we're feeling. When you write for yourself, I don't care how old you are, your pen matters, what you say matters, how you say it matters, and you're important just because you say you are. Don't let anybody limit your pen because it doesn't suit them. Be the poet you want to be the spoken word poet you want to be, express yourself freely, let your pen go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. I was going to ask for your website information, but you beat me to it. So thank you so much for joining us today. This was really, really lovely.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.